The situation in the Middle East has been deteriorating since the United States announced it was pulling out of the controversial Iran nuclear deal. Israel has now fired airstrikes at Iranian targets in Syria after they say Iran fired missiles at them. Now Saudi Arabia has said it will launch its own nuclear weapons program if Iran decides to restart theirs. So it's getting complicated. European leaders, meanwhile, say they're still committed to the deal. They hope Iran is too. Meanwhile, peace is threatening to actually break out on the Korean Peninsula as the first ever meeting between a sitting U.S. president and the leader of North Korea is set to take place on June 12th in Singapore. What can we expect from that summit? Joining me now to sort all this out, the former director of CSIS, Canada's top spy agency, the former national security advisor to both Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau, Richard Fadden, Dick Fadden's here, and retired Major General Dave Fraser, who commanded the multinational brigade for Regional Command South in Afghanistan. And he just wrote a great book about it. It's called Operation Medusa, the Furious Battle that Saved Afghanistan from the Taliban, which I highly recommend, is also here. Great to see you, General.
It's great to be with you today.
Guys, first, I always thank you both for your service, and congratulations, you're a member of the Officer of the Order of Canada.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Dick. And let me start with you. Donald Trump pulled out of this deal. I'm not sure he's got a plan B. Smart to pull out of the deal?
I don't think so. I think everybody admits the deal wasn't perfect, but it did circumscribe the Iranians' nuclear program. It didn't do it perfectly, but it slowed them down. One of the other objections that people have with this deal is that it didn't deal at all with Iranian terrorist activities, nor with its mucking about in that area generally. But I think it's far better than not having a deal at all. And you were mentioning in your intro that you thought that the Europeans will try and keep it going. I hope they can. I hope we'll support that. But the United States' commercial and trade reach is so great, they're going to have an uphill battle.
Oh, an uphill battle to keep it. Dave Fraser, what's your take on it? Are we safer without the deal or with the deal?
Well, I think we've actually become a little less safe with the United States pulling out of the deal. They say keep your friends close and your enemies closer, and having a regime like this and talking to them is really important. And also, as Dick said, not a great agreement, but at least it was an agreement where we were talking. We could actually go in there and verify what's going on. But now we've broken that off completely. We've now, emboldened, Israel and now Syria and Iran to start firing missiles at each other. We've now got Saudi Arabia here. We've separated, United States from their traditional allies in Europe. So I mean, this problem and weak agreement just actually got a lot more complicated.
Well, I understand that. Trump seems to have this idea, and we'll get to North Korea in a second, Dick Fadden, that he can break bad deals and make better deals. So the option for him, he seems to suggest, is it's not like we're going to get no deal with Iran. I'm just going to get a better deal. Is that possible?
I think the chances of that happening are virtually zero. Iran is a significant power in the Middle East. It is an ancient civilization. They're a very proud country. They think they've been mistreated badly by the United States overall. They think Mr. Trump is acting irresponsibly. I think there's not a chance in you-know-what that they will possibly renegotiate. I think the most we can hope for is they and the Europeans and we will continue. But I think it is generally going to destabilize the whole area because A, they're taking a whole bunch of oil off the international market. You will have noticed that prices are up already.
Sure.
Saudi Arabia is going to get increasingly concerned. As Dave says, it's mucked up the whole area. Why would they renegotiate when it took months and months of efforts by the P5+1 to get this agreement? I don't think there's a hope in hell.
Dave, where are you? Because in the midst of this, it's hard to negotiate when for the first time ever, Israel and Iran are fighting each other directly, not through proxies. Now, Iran's a bad actor in all sorts of fashions, but boy, is this heating up towards a potential real war, another war in the Middle East.
Well, it demonstrates the United States, which has traditionally, as you go from one president to the other, there was a continuity of what they said. That's all now broken. So, I mean, Trump has said we're going to break this. There is no new deal. There is no incentive to come to the table to negotiate. And I agree with Dick. I mean, this situation is just absolutely, no one wants to deal with this now. It's actually thrown everything up in the air. Trump, as a disruptor, has now gone onto the world stage, and his tactics, I don't think, are going to be positive. They're actually going to boomerang back on him.
Yeah, and I don't know what the strategy is, let alone the tactic. Canada, I have very little role in this moment, but Dick Fadden, under Stephen Harper, the embassy closed. Canada had an embassy in Tehran. Justin Trudeau promised to reopen it. In this moment, is this the time that Canada presses forward, knowing that Trudeau supports that deal? Is this the moment that Justin Trudeau tries to get an embassy back open in Tehran?
Well, my understanding is we've been trying to reopen the embassy for some time. I would say this is not a great time to push. For one thing, it will be misinterpreted by the Americans, and we still have a whole range of a relationship with the Americans to worry about. But it's also important to remember that to reopen an embassy takes two to tango. When Mr. Harper closed the embassy, he really annoyed the Iranians. I cannot imagine that they're going to welcome us back with an embassy without something in return. So I think it's going to complicate the reopening. So even if we tried, if Ms. Freeland tried tomorrow, next week, next month, I think it would be an uphill battle.
Dave, let me turn to you on North Korea. This meeting's pretty extraordinary. Donald Trump has gone from calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man, my button's bigger than your button, to why don't we have a summit on June 12th in Singapore? The United States has now offered to economically support North Korea if they give up their nuclear weapons. What is a measure of success for this summit?
Well, I think, we have to look back in history, because North Korea has a has a good track record in sense of rattling their sabers at the right time. And I recall at the beginning of the Second Gulf War how North Korea did this something very similar to ease economic pressures on their internal situation, to look good in front of their own people against the United States and whatnot. And I think what we've seen here is a very skillful move by that regime. And pulling Trump in to have a discussion, easing economic sanctions. They'll make a promise of doing something. They already have the nuclear capability. They already have the skills to do with this. And I think what we should look at for success is some sort of indication that they might slow down or stop what they're doing right now. But at the same time, I don't think we should trust them at all, because they have not demonstrated historically an element of trust.
Dick.
I'm not a great supporter of Mr. Trump's approach to foreign policy, but I think in this case, maybe his bullying approach to a bully has got them together to talk. If that has the practical result of slightly lowering pressure on the Korean Peninsula, I think that's great. I mean, the South Koreans have now been talking to the North Koreans, but I'm with Dave entirely. The possibility that the North Koreans will give up their nuclear weapons is as great that I can operate on your brain tomorrow. He must have, the leader of North Korea must have in his mind Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein and what happened to them when they didn't have nuclear weapons. It's the only thing, I think, that's preventing a whole raft of possible military activities against North Korea. The event may well cause pressure to be lowered. Maybe there will be a bit of economic this or a bit of strategic that. I don't think there's a possibility that he will abandon his weapons.
Well, I always say, I think we've all learned, let's not tack up the words mission accomplished before the mission is done. Dick Fadden, General Dave Fraser, great to have both of you back on, giving perspective on two critical situations. Thanks so much, gents.
A pleasure.
And check out Dave Fraser's new book, Operation Medusa.